The marble pillar never saw it coming. Penny Wobblethorn's forehead connected with the ancient stone with a sound that echoed through the golden throne room like a dinner bell, and somehow, she managed to make even that look like part of an elaborate bow. Her knees buckled in what appeared to be a graceful curtsy, her arms swept out in perfect symmetry, and for one shining moment, the assembled nobles of the Silver Moon Pack actually thought she'd done it on purpose. Then they noticed her mismatched socks. One sock featured tiny dancing tacos. The other proclaimed in bold letters, "If you can read this, bring snacks." Both peeked out cheerfully from beneath the too-short servant's dress that had been hastily thrown at her 20 minutes ago with the command to "make yourself presentable for His Majesty." The snickering started immediately. "Oh, this is going to be good," whispered Lady Venetia, her perfectly coiffed blonde head tilting toward her companion. "I heard she once got her foot stuck in a bucket during the full moon ceremony." "And fell into the sacred fire pit," added Lord Pemberton with barely concealed glee. "Took 3 wolves to fish her out." From his gleaming throne, Alpha King Darius Fluffington tried very hard to maintain his regal composure. He'd been crowned exactly 43 minutes ago, the golden circlet still felt foreign on his dark hair, and the last thing he needed was to be caught laughing at what was clearly intended to be the evening's cruelest entertainment. But dear gods, she was just standing there, swaying slightly, one hand pressed to her forehead where a small red mark was already blooming. Her brown hair had escaped whatever pins someone had attempted to wrestle it into, creating a halo of chaos around her heart-shaped face. And those eyes, wide, green, and currently slightly unfocused, held an expression of mild confusion, as if she wasn't entirely sure how she'd gotten here. Which, knowing Penny Wobblethorn's reputation, was entirely possible. "Your Majesty," announced Chancellor Bitsworth in his most pompous tone, "for your royal entertainment, we present the pack's most unique Omega. She will now perform a traditional dance to honor your coronation." The word "traditional" hung in the air like a badly told lie. Everyone knew this was about humiliation, not honor. The pack had been whispering for months about Penny's apparent wolflessness. At 22, she still hadn't shifted, still showed no signs of the supernatural strength and grace that even the lowest Omega possessed. She was an embarrassment. A liability. And now, entertainment. Darius felt his jaw tighten. His inner wolf, Magnus, stirred restlessly in his chest, emanating disapproval at the spectacle. But protocol demanded he allow it. A new king couldn't show weakness, couldn't appear to play favorites with the pack's misfits. Even if those misfits had eyes like spring forests and smelled faintly of vanilla and something else, something his wolf couldn't quite identify but wanted desperately to investigate. Penny's voice carried clearly through the suddenly hushed throne room. She looked around at the sea of expectant, amused faces and visibly swallowed. "I should probably mention that I've never actually learned any traditional dances. Also, I'm pretty sure I sprained my ankle walking up the stairs." The laughter was immediate and merciless. "Oh, just wing it, darling," called out Lady Venetia. "I'm sure it will be memorable." Penny's cheeks flushed pink, but she squared her shoulders with surprising determination. "Right. Winging it. I can do that. Probably." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began what could generously be called a warm-up routine. It was a disaster. Her arms moved in 3 different directions at once. She somehow managed to tangle her left elbow with her right wrist. One foot went forward while the other went sideways, creating a sort of twisted pretzel effect that defied several laws of anatomy. She wobbled, overcorrected, wobbled in the other direction, and finally achieved a position that looked like she was attempting to hug herself while doing a one-legged squat. The nobles were in stitches. Even the normally stoic palace guards were fighting smiles. But Darius found himself leaning forward in his throne, watching with growing fascination. Because there was something about the way she moved, even in her spectacular clumsiness, that his wolf was responding to. Magnus had gone very still, very alert, in a way that meant pay attention, something important is happening. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. Penny's eyes snapped open, and they weren't quite the same shade of green anymore. They were deeper, older, touched with flecks of gold that seemed to catch and hold the light. Her chaotic movements suddenly found rhythm, purpose, flow. Her tangled arms untangled and swept outward like wings, her uncertain steps became liquid grace, her wobbling transformed into something that was part dance, part ceremony, part magic. She moved like moonlight on water. Like wind through ancient trees. Like every story of the old gods and older powers that parents whispered to their cubs in the dark of winter nights. The laughter died. The whispers stopped. The entire throne room held its collective breath as Penny Wobblethorn, clumsy, wolfless, accident-prone Penny, danced with a grace that made the air itself seem to shimmer. Darius's hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly his knuckles went white. Magnus wasn't just alert now, he was practically howling with recognition, with want, with something that felt dangerously close to reverence. Mine, the wolf whispered urgently. Ours. Powerful. Ancient. Mine. The dance built in intensity, Penny's movements becoming more complex, more hypnotic. Her servant's dress flowed around her like liquid silver, and for a moment, just a moment, Darius could have sworn he saw something flickering at the edges of her form. Something larger. Something with fangs and ancient eyes and power that made the very air taste of copper and starlight. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the dance ended. Penny came to rest in the center of the room, one arm extended toward the ceiling, the other curved at her side, her head thrown back in a pose of such perfect, ethereal beauty that several nobles actually gasped. The silence stretched. And stretched. And then Penny straightened, took one step backward to acknowledge the throne, and walked directly into a marble pillar with a solid thunk. Oh, for crying out loud, she muttered, and the words weren't quite English. They were older, deeper, touched with power that made every wolf ear in the room swivel toward her. 7 kinds of dancing shadows and blessed moonfire, who puts a pillar right there? She rubbed her nose, looked around at the sea of shocked faces, and her cheeks went bright red. Was that okay? Because honestly, I have no idea what just happened, and I think I might have pulled something important. But Darius was no longer listening to her words. He was too busy trying to figure out why his wolf was ready to leap off the throne and claim her right there in front of 300 witnesses. And why he was having such a hard time arguing with that plan. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Darius Fluffington had been an alpha for exactly 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. He'd led successful border negotiations, settled 3 territorial disputes, and once talked a rogue bear shifter out of declaring war over a honey shortage. He was not, however, prepared for the logistical nightmare of casually bumping into one specific Omega at a party where everyone was bowing every time he breathed. Your Majesty, might I suggest, Chancellor Bitsworth began. No, Darius said firmly, adjusting his formal jacket for the 15th time in 10 minutes. I don't need suggestions. I just need to mingle. Kings mingle, right? Well, yes, but typically not by hiding behind potted plants and stalking the catering staff. Darius shot him a look that had made grown alphas whimper. Unfortunately, it had zero effect on chancellors who'd helped raise him. I am not stalking anyone. I am strategically positioning myself near the refreshment area to engage in casual conversation with my subjects. The refreshment area where Miss Wobblethorn has been stress-eating mini quiches for the past 20 minutes? Pure coincidence. Magnus, his inner wolf, snorted with derision. Smooth as sandpaper, as usual. Shut up, Darius thought back. You're the one who keeps howling every time she laughs. She has a good laugh. Like silver bells and mischief. You're supposed to be the rational one. And you're supposed to be the one with opposable thumbs and social skills. Yet here we are. Darius ignored his wolf and peered around the ornamental fern. Penny was indeed at the snack table, though stress-eating might have been an understatement. She'd created what appeared to be a small fortress of mini quiches, cucumber sandwiches, and those tiny cream puffs that exploded if you looked at them wrong. Her servant's dress had been replaced with something marginally more appropriate, a simple blue dress that actually fit, but her hair was still doing its own thing, and she was talking to herself in rapid, animated whispers. Now or never. Darius straightened his shoulders, checked that his crown was on straight, and strode purposefully toward the refreshment table with all the casual nonchalance of a freight train. Oh! Penny jumped as he approached, nearly dropping her plate of architectural cheese arrangements. Your Majesty. I wasn't hoarding food, I swear. Well, okay, I was totally hoarding food, but it's really good food, and I missed lunch because someone, not naming names, decided I needed to be scrubbed within an inch of my life and then stuffed into formal wear with approximately 15 minutes notice. Darius blinked. Most people became tongue-tied in his presence. Penny had apparently achieved the opposite effect. Please, he said, reaching for a tiny sandwich that looked less likely to explode. Don't let me interrupt your strategic food gathering. Thank you, Your Majesty. You're very understanding for someone who probably has people whose entire job is making sure you never run out of snacks. She paused, tilting her head. Do you have snack people? Because that sounds like the best job ever. Yes. I suppose I do have snack people. This conversation was not going according to any plan he'd ever made. The dance you performed earlier. Oh, gods, please don't bring that up. Penny's cheeks went pink. I honestly have no idea what happened. 1 minute I was doing my impression of a caffeinated octopus, and the next minute I was, well, I'm not sure what I was doing, but it felt like someone else was driving. Interesting, Magnus noted. She doesn't remember the power. Darius filed that information away and attempted his most casual tone. Have you always been musically inclined? Penny nearly choked on her mini quiche. Musically inclined? Your Majesty, I once got kicked out of the pack choir for accidentally harmonizing in a frequency that made all the dogs in the village howl. The choir director said I was supernaturally off-key. Right. Of course. Darius scrambled for his next carefully planned question. So, do you dream of silver things? Asking for a friend. The friend is me. The words hung in the air between them like a confession of complete social incompetence. Penny stared at him. I'm sorry, what? Silver things. In dreams. It's a perfectly normal question that normal people ask at parties. Even as he said it, Darius knew he sounded like he'd been raised by wolves. Which, technically, he had been, but that was beside the point. Are you feeling okay, Your Majesty? Because you're looking a little flushed, and that question was wonderfully bizarre. Darius closed his eyes briefly. Magnus was laughing so hard inside his head that it felt like having a small earthquake in his skull. I'd been having some unusual dreams lately. I thought perhaps, never mind. It's not important. Oh, unusual dreams. Penny brightened immediately. I love unusual dreams. I had one last week where I was having a very serious philosophical discussion with a squirrel about the proper way to store acorns for winter. Turns out, I was wrong about basically everything. You talk to squirrels? Well, not intentionally. But Mr. Nutkin is very opinionated, and sometimes he just starts chattering at me when I'm trying to work in the garden. It's only polite to respond. Penny paused, then looked horrified. Oh, gods. I just told the Alpha King that I talk to squirrels. This is why I'm not allowed at important social functions. Darius felt something warm and unexpected bloom in his chest. What else aren't you allowed at? Pack meetings, formal dinners, the full moon ceremonies, ever since the fire pit incident, and pretty much anything involving more than 5 people and breakable objects. Penny was counting on her fingers now. Oh, and the children's playgroup. But that was really not my fault. I mean, how was I supposed to know that doggy door was too small? I was just trying to retrieve a ball. You got stuck in a doggy door. For 3 hours. In front of the entire Addams family and their visiting relatives from the mountain pack. Beta Johnson had to use butter to get me out. She shrugged philosophically. Mrs. Adams still sends me Christmas cards with pictures of her kids playing with that doggy door. I think she finds it endearing." Darius stared at her. This woman, this wonderfully, impossibly chaotic woman, had danced with power that made his wolf want to prostrate himself in worship, and she was telling him about getting stuck in doggy doors like it was a perfectly normal Tuesday activity. "The dreams," he said, abandoning all pretense of subtlety, "involve a silver wolf. A very clumsy silver wolf who keeps tripping over things and getting her head stuck in things." Penny froze, a cucumber sandwich halfway to her mouth. "That's oddly specific." "She's magnificent," Darius continued, watching Penny's face carefully. "Beautiful and powerful and completely hopeless at spatial awareness. She trips over her own paws, walks into trees, and once got her entire head stuck in what I think was a decorative urn." The cucumber sandwich fell from Penny's suddenly nerveless fingers. "Your Majesty," she said faintly, "I think I need to sit down." "Are you all right?" No, I'm really not." Penny was staring at her hands now, and Darius followed her gaze to see delicate traceries of what looked like silver glitter appearing on her skin. The marks were beautiful, intricate, spiraling up her arms like living art. "Penny. Oh, this is just perfect," she muttered, rubbing frantically at the marks. "I knew I should have been more careful with the craft supplies. Gran always said I'd get craft herpes from working with all that glitter, and now look." "Craft herpes?" Darius interrupted. "From my job at Sparkle and Shine Party Supplies. I do decorations for pack events, and some of those glitters are really persistent. But this is worse than usual, it's practically glowing, and, oh." She stopped rubbing and stared at her hands in growing alarm. "Oh, no. Oh, this is very not good." The silver marks were indeed glowing now, pulsing gently with their own inner light. Around them, the party continued, but Darius noticed several wolves turning their heads, nostrils flaring as they caught a new scent on the air. Power. Old power. The kind that made alphas nervous and omegas hide. "Penny," Darius said urgently, "we need to get you somewhere private. Now." "I can't leave," she said, backing away from the table. "I'm working. I'm supposed to be helping with cleanup, and if I disappear, Mrs. Henderson will have my head, and..." She stopped mid-sentence, doubling over with a gasp of pain. "Penny. Something's wrong," she panted. "I feel like I'm being turned inside out, and there's this pressure in my chest, and..." She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Your Majesty, I think I'm about to do something really embarrassing." "Like what?" "I have absolutely no idea, but knowing me, it's going to be spectacular." The first crack of shifting bones echoed through the throne room like a gunshot. Several things happened at once. Every wolf in the room went dead silent, heads turning toward the sound. Lady Venetia dropped her champagne glass. Chancellor Bitsworth made a sound like a deflating balloon. And Penny Wobblethorn began to glow like she'd swallowed moonlight. "Oh, shit," she whispered, and then she was falling forward, her body stretching and changing and reforming in ways that should have been painful but instead felt like coming home. Darius watched in stunned fascination as Penny's first shift unfolded before 300 witnesses. It was nothing like the awkward, painful transformations most wolves experienced. This was liquid grace, natural as breathing, beautiful as sunrise. When it was over, where Penny had stood, there was now the most magnificent wolf Darius had ever seen. She was large for a female, with fur that seemed to be woven from actual silver and eyes like liquid emeralds. Power radiated from her in waves that made the air taste of lightning and ancient forests. She was stunning. Breathtaking. Absolutely perfect. She was also backing rapidly away from the crowd with her ears flat against her head and an expression of pure panic. And then, because she was still fundamentally Penny, she backed directly into the decorative urn display. Her head went into the largest urn like it had been designed specifically for that purpose. The muffled sound that emerged was definitely profanity, though thankfully garbled by both the urn and her wolf form. "Well," said Chancellor Bitsworth faintly, "that's new." Magnus was practically purring with satisfaction. Told you she was perfect. Darius, abandoning all royal protocol, strode across the room to where his mate was trying to shake an ancient Grecian urn off her head. Don't move, he told her gently. Let me help. The green eyes that peered at him through the urn's opening were bright with embarrassment and something that might have been relief. Mine, Magnus said with deep contentment. Definitely, completely, hilariously mine. For once, Darius was in complete agreement. 20 minutes later, urn successfully removed and Penny successfully shifted back into human form, and wrapped in Darius's formal jacket, they sat in his private study while she explained about her grandmother's herbal anxiety cookies. Gran's been making them for me since I was 12, Penny said, curled up in the massive leather chair with a cup of tea. Special recipe, she said. For my nerves. I never questioned it because, well, they're really good cookies, and I do have terrible nerves. And you've been eating them how often? Daily. Sometimes twice daily if it was a particularly stressful day. Which, let's be honest, is most days when you're me. Darius rubbed his temples. Penny, those weren't anxiety cookies. Those were suppression cookies. Your grandmother has been deliberately blocking your wolf for over a decade. But why would she? Penny stopped, her face going pale. Oh. Oh, no. She was protecting me, wasn't she? Because of what I am. What are you? Darius asked gently. Penny looked at her hands, where faint silver traces still flickered beneath her skin. I don't know. But it's big, isn't it? And probably dangerous. And definitely going to be incredibly inconvenient. Darius thought of his dreams, of the power he'd felt radiating from her during the dance, of the way every wolf in the pack had instinctively recognized her dominance when she'd shifted. Yes, he said honestly. It's probably going to be all of those things. Penny sighed and pulled his jacket tighter around herself. Well, she said philosophically, at least I finally know why I'm so good at getting my head stuck in things. Apparently, it's a family trait. Despite everything, the political implications, the pack dynamics they'd just completely upended, the fact that his mate had literally been hidden in plain sight for over a decade, Darius found himself smiling. We'll figure it out, he promised. Together? Together. Outside the study windows, the full moon was rising, and somewhere in the distance, a squirrel was chattering urgently about the proper storage of winter acorns. It was, Darius thought, going to be a very interesting courtship. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. Stella Veronica Prisworth Snudington had many talents. She could organize a charity gala in 6 hours, apply winged eyeliner that could cut glass, and maintain a flawless Instagram feed with the dedication of a medieval monk illuminating manuscripts. She could also smell a threat to her perfectly curated life from 3 territories away. And right now, her perfectly sculpted nostrils were practically vibrating with suspicion. Darling, she purred to her phone as she applied a face mask made from genuine imported moon-blessed clay. Something is terribly, horribly wrong. The king, my future husband and the key to my upcoming lifestyle brand launch, has spent the last 3 days asking the kitchen staff if they've noticed any squirrels acting unusually chatty around the palace. Her best friend and fellow influencer, Tiffany Sparklebottom, gasped dramatically through the video call. No. Squirrels? That's so random. And not very brand appropriate. Exactly. Stella adjusted her ring light to better showcase her outrage. Yesterday I caught him hiding behind a tapestry, trying to eavesdrop on the gardening staff. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was conducting important royal research into interspecies communication patterns. Tiffany, I don't think that's even a real thing. Have you considered that maybe he's having some sort of breakdown? Royal men are so fragile. Stella paused her skincare routine to consider this. Possible. But I think it's worse than that. I think there's another woman. Gasp. How can you tell? Because whenever he asks these ridiculous questions, he gets this dopey expression. Like a golden retriever who's just discovered tennis balls exist. It's nauseating. Stella began aggressively applying cucumber slices to her eyes. And then there's the dancing incident. The servant girl who didn't faceplant? Penny Wobblethorn. That's the name that keeps coming up in staff gossip. Apparently, she works at some tacky party supply store, and she's been spotted around the palace doing things. What kind of things? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. And then I intend to eliminate the problem. Stella smiled sweetly at her phone camera. After all, I have a wedding to plan and a brand to launch. Future queen life blessed and engaged Stella's royal journey. Oh, are you going to do something dramatic? Can I film it for my story? Darling, everything I do is dramatic. It's part of my personal brand. 3 days later, Penny Wobblethorn was having what could generously be called a week. She discovered she was a werewolf, accidentally seduced the Alpha King through the medium of interpretive dance, and somehow become the center of a political drama she didn't understand. On top of that, her grandmother's supply of suppression cookies had run out, which meant her newly awakened wolf was making her presence known at the most inconvenient times. Like right now, when she was trying to assemble centerpieces for the Miller wedding and her inner wolf kept insisting that the silk roses were not vibrant enough and lacking in proper natural authenticity. They're fake flowers, Penny muttered to herself as she fought with a particularly stubborn bit of ribbon. They're supposed to lack natural authenticity. That's the point. Real flowers would smell better, her wolf observed. And they wouldn't make that weird plastic sound when you move them. We've been over this, Penny said aloud, then looked around quickly to make sure no one had heard her talking to herself. Again. We work at a party supply store. Everything here is fake. The flowers, the decorative fruit, probably half the glitter. I still think we should bite something. We are not biting anything in the workplace. That's how you get fired. What about just a small bite? Maybe something sparkly? No biting. It was at that exact moment that 12 mariachi musicians burst through the front door of Sparkle and Shine Party Supplies, playing what sounded like a funeral march arranged for maximum ear-bleeding potential. Penny dropped her ribbon and stared as the musicians spread throughout the small store, somehow managing to position themselves for optimal chaos. They knocked over 3 display stands, sent a cascade of plastic butterflies flying through the air, and began playing loud enough to rattle the windows. Excuse me. Penny shouted over the din, we're closed for inventory. The lead musician, a man with an impressively large sombrero, shook his head and pointed to a small card in his hat band. Special delivery for Penny Wobblethorn. Courtesy of an anonymous admirer. This is the worst serenade in the history of serenades. It's not a serenade. It's a distraction. That's when Penny noticed the net. It was hanging from the ceiling, positioned directly over where she'd been working, and it was beginning to descend with suspicious precision. At the same time, what appeared to be a decorative chandelier was swinging in through the open front door, operated by someone she couldn't see but who was clearly not very good at chandelier operation. This seems like a trap, her wolf observed helpfully. You think? Penny muttered, then louder, okay, everyone out. This is either a very confused birthday party or someone is trying to murder me. The mariachi band looked at each other, shrugged in unison, and filed out the door with the chandelier operator, who turned out to be a very sweaty man in a fake mustache. Penny stood alone in her destroyed workplace, covered in plastic butterflies and fake rose petals, staring at the net that was now dangling at eye level. Well, she said to no one in particular, that was new. From his position behind a particularly large potted fern outside Sparkle and Shine Party Supplies, Darius watched the mariachi band retreat and wondered if he was losing his mind. You're definitely losing something, Magnus commented. Possibly your dignity. Definitely your stealth skills. I am conducting important reconnaissance, Darius thought back. As a responsible king, I need to understand what threats what Penny might be facing. Your mate, Magnus corrected smugly. Just say it. She's our mate, and you're spying on her because you're worried about her safety and also because you like watching her work. That was, unfortunately, entirely accurate. Darius had been finding excuses to check on Penny for the past 3 days, ever since the cookie revelation. He told himself it was about pack security and the implications of having a powerful, previously unknown wolf in their territory. He did not tell himself that he'd memorized her work schedule and found himself strategically positioned near her usual routes with suspicious frequency. He was definitely not stalking her. Alpha kings did not stalk people. They conducted strategic observations. Through potted plants, Magnus added helpfully. Very regal. Darius was about to argue when he heard the sound that made his blood run cold, children crying. He peered around the fern to see a group of small wolves, cubs who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, standing frozen in terror as something large and growling emerged from the alley next to the party store. Rogue wolves. 3 of them, by the smell, and definitely not friendly. Darius was already moving when he heard the sound that made his inner wolf sit up and howl with recognition, the distinctive crack of shifting bones. Penny's silver wolf materialized between the cubs and the rogues like moonlight given form and fury. She was magnificent in her rage, larger than any female wolf had a right to be, with power radiating from her in waves that made the air itself seem to shimmer. The rogues took one look at her and clearly decided they'd made a terrible mistake. Unfortunately, they were also too proud to back down. What followed was less a fight than a demonstration in why you should never threaten children in front of an angry mother wolf, even if that mother wolf had never actually had children and was mostly just operating on instinct and protective fury. Penny's wolf moved like liquid lightning, all grace and controlled violence. She didn't just defeat the rogues, she schooled them, sending them fleeing with their tails between their legs and several new scars to remember her by. And then, because she was still fundamentally Penny, she immediately shifted her attention to the cubs and began making soft, worried whining sounds while nosing each one to make sure they were unhurt. She's the one. Magnus bellowed inside Darius's head with such volume and enthusiasm that Darius actually staggered. Mate. Perfect. Powerful. Protective. Ours. Mine. She's the one, she's the one, she's the... Oh, for crying out loud, Darius muttered, and promptly fell sideways out of his hiding spot, taking the potted fern with him. He landed in an undignified heap on the sidewalk, covered in dirt and small decorative pebbles, just as Penny's wolf looked up from the cubs. Their eyes met across the chaos of overturned pottery and scattered plant matter. Time stopped. The mate bond hit him like a freight train made of starlight and certainty, so overwhelming that for a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare into those impossible green eyes and feel his entire world rearrange itself around this one perfect, powerful, completely chaotic woman. Told you so, Magnus said with deep satisfaction. Penny's wolf tilted her head, and Darius could swear he saw amusement in her expression. Then she shifted back to human form, thankfully. His jacket from the other night was apparently part of her emergency clothing stash now, and walked over to where he was still sprawled on the ground. Your Majesty, she said politely, were you researching plant maintenance? Something like that, he said weakly. And the mariachi band? I have no idea what you're talking about. Penny looked at him for a long moment, then held out her hand to help him up. You know, if you wanted to see me again, you could have just asked. I'm not exactly hard to find. Darius took her hand, and the moment their skin touched, he felt the mate bond snap into place with an almost audible click. From the way Penny's eyes widened, she felt it too. Oh, she breathed. Well. That's definitely not craft herpes. No, Darius agreed, getting to his feet but not letting go of her hand. It's really not. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, staring at each other while the universe finished rearranging itself around them. So, Penny said finally, I'm guessing this complicates things. Probably. And I'm also guessing someone really doesn't want us figuring this out, considering the whole mariachi ambush situation. Almost certainly. Right. Penny squeezed his hand once, then let go to check on the cubs, who were watching the proceedings with the fascination of children witnessing something they definitely weren't supposed to see. Well, Your Majesty, I hope you're ready for things to get weird, because if my track record is any indication, this is just the beginning. Darius watched her crouch down to the cubs' level, speaking to them in soft, reassuring tones while simultaneously texting their parents on her phone. She was competent and caring and completely unconscious of her own power, and Magnus was right. She was absolutely, completely, perfectly theirs. He was also pretty sure she was right about things getting weird. 3 miles away, Stella Veronica Prisworth Snittington stared at her phone in growing horror as her carefully orchestrated plan fell apart in real time. The mariachi band failed, she announced to her bathroom mirror, where she was applying her third face mask of the day. The chandelier gambit was a complete disaster. And according to my source, the king was spotted at that tacky party store again. She'd been live streaming her skincare routine to her 2.3 million followers, but this called for drastic measures. She ended the stream and opened Wolfbook, scrolling through her DMs until she found the conversation thread she'd been carefully nurturing for weeks. Stella Influencer Queen, emergency situation. The servant girl is proving more resilient than expected. Need new strategy. Rogue Alpha _Dark Moon, told you this was a waste of time. Should have just eliminated her directly. Stella Influencer Queen, can't be traced back to me. Image is everything. Need something that looks accidental. Packless Wolf _47, what about a hunting accident? Very traditional. Rogue Alpha _Dark Moon, or we could arrange for her to disappear entirely. Happens all the time with low-ranking wolves. Stella paused, her perfectly manicured fingers hovering over her phone keyboard. She'd started this conversation thread as a way to maintain her follower engagement with the edgier side of Werewolf's social media. Rogue wolves were very popular with her demographic, dangerous, mysterious, perfect for her brand aesthetic. She hadn't originally intended to use them for actual murder. But the king was supposed to be hers. The crown was supposed to be hers. The lifestyle brand empire she'd been planning was supposed to launch with her as the perfect queen influencer, and some clumsy nobody was not going to ruin that. Stella Influencer Queen, fine. But it has to look natural. And I was never part of this conversation. Rogue Alpha _Dark Moon, understood. We'll handle it. Stella deleted the conversation thread, cleared her browser history, and smiled at her reflection. Sorry, Penny Wobblethorn, she said sweetly to her mirror. But this is bigger than you. This is about my brand. Outside her window, storm clouds were gathering, and somewhere in the distance, a squirrel was chattering urgently about the proper protocols for warning people about incoming danger. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 4. Welcome to what is definitely a casual pack meeting and not at all an excuse to spend time with you, Darius announced to the empty conference room, then immediately winced at how that sounded. He'd been practicing that opening line for 20 minutes, and it had sounded much more suave in his head. Smooth as a gravel milkshake, Magnus commented helpfully. Maybe try the PowerPoint approach. Nothing says mysterious mentor like slides with bullet points. The PowerPoint was your idea, Darius muttered, adjusting his laptop for the third time. And I thought you said it would make me look prepared and professional. I was being sarcastic. You know, that thing where I say one thing but mean the opposite? We've discussed this. Before Darius could argue with his inner wolf further, Penny knocked on the conference room door and peeked her head inside. She was wearing what appeared to be her work clothes, a Sparkle and Shine Party Supplies t-shirt covered in glitter handprints and jeans with a suspicious scorch mark on one knee. Your Majesty. I got your very official-looking invitation to attend a casual pack meeting regarding recent supernatural developments. Should I be worried that I'm in trouble, or excited that I'm finally invited to something? Neither. Both. I mean, Darius took a deep breath and attempted to channel the dignity he'd presumably inherited along with the crown. Please, come in. And call me Darius. We're off the record here. Penny stepped inside and immediately zeroed in on his laptop setup. Is that a PowerPoint presentation? Oh my God, you made slides. This is either going to be the most professional pack meeting in history or the most adorable thing I've ever seen. It's not adorable, Darius said defensively, then caught sight of his title slide and felt his cheeks heat up. Okay, it might be slightly adorable. Penny leaned over his shoulder to read the screen, and Darius caught a whiff of her scent, vanilla and something green and growing, with an underlying note of, was that smoke? So you might be magical, a beginner's guide, she read aloud. Complete with animated slide transitions and what appears to be clip art of a wolf wearing a wizard hat. Darius, this is the most wonderfully nerdy thing anyone has ever done for me. I wanted to be thorough, he said, trying not to notice how close she was standing or how her hair smelled faintly of singed leaves. And the wolf wizard seemed thematically appropriate. It absolutely is. Can we start with the slides? Because I have so many questions, and I'm hoping at least some of them are covered in your presentation. Darius clicked to the first slide, which featured a cheerful cartoon wolf and the heading, Congratulations. You might be more than you think. Okay, he began, falling into his practiced lecture tone, so we've established that you're not actually wolfless, you're just severely suppressed. The question now is, what exactly were you suppressed from becoming? Something that sets things on fire when I sneeze, Penny said promptly. I learned that yesterday when I accidentally torched Mrs. Patterson's prize roses. Also, I think I might be radioactive, because my watch stopped working and my phone keeps taking pictures by itself. Darius blinked. Your phone is taking pictures by itself? Mostly of the ceiling. Sometimes of my feet. It's very artistic, in a completely inexplicable way. Penny settled into the chair next to him, apparently unaware that her proximity was making Magnus perform what felt like enthusiastic cartwheels. Please continue with your extremely professional presentation. Click. Next slide, signs you might be magically significant, beyond the obvious. Right. So, enhanced physical abilities, check. Unusual effect on electronics, check. Spontaneous combustion. It's not spontaneous, Penny interrupted. It's very specifically when I sneeze. And only when I'm surprised or stressed. Which, let's be honest, is most of the time lately. Noted. We'll add stress-induced pyrokinesis to the list. Darius made a note on his tablet, trying to look professional and not at all like he was completely making this up as he went along. Tell me about your parents. Penny's expression immediately shifted from amused to guarded. What about them? The official pack records say they died in a rogue attack when you were 7. But given what we now know about your unique situation, I'm wondering if there's more to that story. Gran never wanted to talk about it, Penny said slowly. She said it was too painful, and that they'd want me to focus on the future, not the past. But lately, with everything that's happening, I've been having these dreams. What kind of dreams? Memories, I think. Of my mother teaching me songs in a language I don't recognize, and my father showing me how to mix herbs in very specific ways. And there was this recipe. She trailed off, looking troubled. A recipe for what? This is going to sound completely ridiculous. After the mariachi incident, I'm prepared for anything. Penny took a deep breath. Hair conditioner. But not just any hair conditioner, the kind that actually works. Like, makes your hair impossibly shiny and manageable and smells like summer meadows. My mother had the most beautiful hair I've ever seen, and she was always mixing up these treatments that the other pack females would practically kill for. Darius stared at her. You think your parents were murdered over hair care products? I know how it sounds, but you don't understand. Good hair conditioner is like the holy grail of pack social dynamics. Plus, there were these other things, conversations I remember my parents having late at night about the old bloodlines and ancient responsibilities and keeping the recipes safe. I always thought they were talking about cooking. That's not about cooking, Magnus said urgently. Tell her to keep going. What else do you remember? My father had this old book. Leather-bound, written in multiple languages, filled with what I thought were family recipes. My mother used to read from it when she thought I was asleep. But after they died, Gran said the book was lost in the attack. Penny frowned. Except I don't think there was an attack. I think I would remember something like that. Before Darius could respond, there was a soft chiming sound from Penny's direction. Oh, that's just my phone taking another artistic photo, she said, pulling it out of her pocket. It's been doing this all. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen. That's not the ceiling. Darius leaned over to look. The photo showed what appeared to be a page from an old book, covered in symbols and text in multiple languages. At the top of the page, in elegant script, were the words, "Bloodline of the Silver Moon, Recipes for Power." How did your phone take a picture of something that doesn't exist? Darius asked. Maybe it does exist, Penny said quietly. Maybe Gran didn't tell me everything. The blood moon is in 3 days, Magnus reminded him urgently. If she's what I think she is, her powers are going to start manifesting whether she's ready or not. As if summoned by his wolf's words, Penny suddenly sneezed. The conference table burst into flames. Oh, come on! Penny exclaimed, jumping back from the rapidly spreading fire. I wasn't even that stressed. Darius quickly grabbed the emergency fire extinguisher from the corner and doused the flames, leaving them standing in a room that smelled like smoke and wet ash, staring at the charred remains of his carefully prepared presentation. So, Penny said philosophically, I'm guessing that's not a normal werewolf thing. No. No, it's really not. And the blood moon you mentioned in your slide notes, that's probably going to make this worse, isn't it? Darius looked at her, covered in fire extinguisher foam, standing in the ruins of a conference room, apparently completely unfazed by the fact that she'd just torched furniture with her sinuses, and felt his heart do something complicated and warm. Probably, he admitted. Right. Penny pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm texting Gran. Time for some answers. 2 hours later, they were sitting in Penny's grandmother's cozy kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of 60 years of serious baking and what appeared to be a small pharmaceutical operation disguised as an herb garden. Well, said Eleanor Wobblethorn, pouring tea from a pot that was definitely older than the pack itself, I suppose it was only a matter of time before you figured it out. Gran, Penny said carefully, please tell me you haven't been running a supernatural drug ring out of your kitchen. Don't be ridiculous, dear. I've been running a supernatural drug ring out of my garden. The kitchen is just for processing. Eleanor settled into her chair with the air of someone confessing to decades of perfectly reasonable criminal activity. Your parents were the last of the Silver Moon bloodline, Penny. Direct descendants of the pack's founding family, with access to power that most wolves can only dream of. And they were killed for it? Darius asked. They were killed because someone wanted what they knew. The old recipes, the ancient ceremonies, the bloodline magic that comes with being a Silver Moon heir. Eleanor's expression hardened. I've spent the last 15 years keeping you hidden, keeping you safe, keeping you ignorant. But with the blood moon coming, my powers are waking up whether you like it or not, Penny finished. Hence the spontaneous combustion. Among other things. Your parents could influence weather, communicate with all manner of creatures, and yes, create hair care products that were genuinely magical. Your mother's conditioner recipe was just the tip of the iceberg. Penny stared at her grandmother. So when you said they died in a rogue attack, they died protecting the knowledge that would have made you a target. And now that you're manifesting, you're going to be a target anyway. Eleanor reached across the table and took Penny's hand. I'm sorry, dear. I thought I could keep you safe forever. Penny squeezed her grandmother's hand, then looked at Darius. So, to recap, I'm apparently magical royalty with a tendency to set things on fire when I sneeze. Someone killed my parents for hair care recipes and other unspecified ancient knowledge, and there's a blood moon coming that's going to make all of this much worse. That's an accurate summary, Darius said. And you're still interested in pursuing this whole mate bond thing? Because I feel like I should mention that my love life tends to be complicated even under normal circumstances. Before Darius could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent notification. He glanced at it and felt his blood run cold. What is it? Penny asked. Stella's going live on Wolfbook. The title of her stream is Stella vs. Basic, the Ultimate Showdown. He looked up from his phone. She's challenging you to a death match. On live television. In 30 minutes. Eleanor sighed and stood up, walking to a cabinet that looked suspiciously like it might contain weapons. Well, dear, I suppose it's time you learned about the rest of your inheritance. The rest of my inheritance? Your parents weren't just magical royalty, Penny. They were also extremely good at not dying in ridiculous public spectacles. Eleanor pulled out what appeared to be a very old, very sharp sword. Family tradition. 27 minutes later, Penny stood in the palace courtyard, still wearing her sparkle and shine t-shirt and holding a sword that was apparently a family heirloom, facing off against Stella Veronica Prisworth Snuddington, who had arrived in full battle regalia and enough ring lights to illuminate a small stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, wolves and other supernatural beings, Stella announced to her phone camera, which was being held by a very nervous-looking assistant, welcome to the event you've all been waiting for. I'm Stella, your future queen and lifestyle guru, and tonight I'm going to prove once and for all that bloodline means nothing compared to proper breeding and superior social media strategy. The live stream viewer count was climbing rapidly. 12,000 viewers. 25,000, 40,000. This is insane, Penny muttered to Darius, who was standing at the edge of the courtyard looking like he wanted to intervene but was being held back by protocol and approximately 6 palace guards. She's live-streaming a death match like it's a makeup tutorial. Just remember what your grandmother taught you, he called out. And try not to set anything important on fire. No promises. Stella raised her sword, a gleaming, obviously expensive piece that probably cost more than Penny's annual salary, and smiled brilliantly at the camera. Now, let's see what this little nobody is really made of. Stella vs. Basic Deathmatch Monday Influencer Life. 50,000 viewers and climbing. Penny hefted her grandmother's sword, which felt surprisingly balanced in her hands, and felt something ancient and powerful stirring in her chest. Around them, the air began to shimmer with silver light, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled despite the clear sky. Stella, she said conversationally, before we do this, I feel like I should mention that I'm having a really weird week, my stress levels are through the roof, and I've recently discovered that I have a tendency to accidentally torch things when I'm nervous. Is that supposed to scare me? Stella laughed, but there was something uncertain in her voice as she noticed the way the silver light was gathering around Penny like living starlight. It's supposed to be fair warning, Penny said, and then she sneezed. The decorative fountain behind Stella exploded in a geyser of steam and silver fire. The viewer count hit 75,000. Oh, Stella said faintly, shit. Now things get interesting, Magnus observed from his position in Darius's head, where he was practically vibrating with pride and anticipation. Our maid is about to become the most viral werewolf in internet history. Darius couldn't argue with that assessment. He also couldn't look away. This was either going to be the most epic battle in pack history, or the most spectacular disaster ever recorded. Knowing Penny, it would probably be both. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 5, Family Secrets and Awkward Revelations. The death match lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds, which was probably a record for both brevity and sheer concentrated chaos. It wasn't that Penny was particularly skilled with her grandmother's ancient sword. In fact, she spent most of the fight apologizing for accidentally cutting off pieces of Stella's meticulously styled hair. The problem was that every time Stella lunged forward with her expensive weapon, Penny would dodge instinctively, sneeze from the stress, and accidentally set something on fire. First it was the decorative topiary. Then the ceremonial banner. Then Stella's backup ring light. Stop sneezing. Stella shrieked, batting at the smoldering remains of her perfectly curled extensions. This is supposed to be dignified combat. I'm trying. Penny called back, narrowly avoiding a particularly aggressive sword thrust. But you keep yelling, and yelling makes me nervous, and nervous makes me sneezy, and... Achoo! Stella's designer battle armor caught fire. That's it. Stella roared, charging forward with her flaming sword raised high, apparently deciding that if she was going to lose her armor, she might as well make it dramatic. Unfortunately for Stella's dramatic moment, Penny chose that exact instant to trip over her own feet. She went down in a tangle of limbs and ancient weaponry, rolling sideways just as Stella's charge carried her past, and directly into the ornamental fountain that had been rebuilt exactly 3 times since Penny's arrival at the palace. The splash was magnificent. The subsequent sizzling sound as Stella's flaming armor met the water was even better. But the best part was definitely the moment when Stella surfaced, soaking wet and covered in decorative water lilies, to find 127,000 people watching her live-streamed humiliation. "Well," said Chancellor Bitsworth mildly, "that was certainly memorable." The live-stream chat was moving so fast it was basically unreadable, but Penny caught several variations of "basic queen wins," "Stella got snezzed," and "who is this magical disaster and where has she been all my life?" "I think," Penny said, climbing to her feet and helping a dripping, defeated Stella out of the fountain, "we should probably call this a draw." "A draw?" Stella sputtered, water cascading from her once perfect hair. "You set me on fire. Multiple times. Accidentally. And I put you out again. That should count for something." From his position at the edge of the courtyard, Darius watched his mate help his former betrothed out of a fountain while 127,000 strangers made memes about the entire situation, and felt something that was either deep love or a mild nervous breakdown. "Definitely love," Magnus said smugly. "She's perfect." "She just defeated Stella by sneezing," Darius pointed out. "Exactly. Perfect." "Your Majesty," Elder Bertha Cranky-Whistle's voice cut through his internal dialogue like a rusty blade through silk, "I believe we need to talk." Darius turned to find the pack's oldest member standing behind him, all 847 years of her leaning heavily on a walking stick that was older than most countries. Elder Bertha had been ancient when his grandfather was young, and she had the unsettling habit of knowing things that had never been written down. "Elder Bertha," he said respectfully, "if this is about the property damage." "Property damage, my wrinkled posterior," she snorted. "This is about bloodlines, boy. And secrets. And the fact that your little girlfriend just proved she's got more royal blood in her pinky finger than your entire family tree." Darius felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "I'm sorry, what?" Silver Wolf, power over fire, eyes that glow like starlight, and the ability to make ancient weapons sing in harmony with her movement. Bertha fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. "I haven't seen magic like that since the moon-blessed royalty were poisoned out of existence 70 years ago." The moon-blessed line died out in a rogue attack. "Rogue attack, my ancient foot." Bertha whacked his shin with her walking stick. "They were murdered, boy. Poisoned. And I know exactly who ordered it done." The courtyard had gone very quiet. Even Stella had stopped dripping loudly enough to listen. "Elder Bertha," Darius said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately nothing. This affects the whole pack." Bertha raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Someone bring me ice cream. This is going to take a while, and I refuse to deliver earth-shattering revelations without proper dessert." 20 minutes later, the entire pack leadership was gathered in the palace dining hall, awkwardly eating ice cream sundaes while Elder Bertha prepared to destroy everything they thought they knew about their history. "These sprinkles are terrible," she announced, poking at her vanilla sundae with obvious disgust. "What are they made of, plastic? In my day, sprinkles had flavor. And color that didn't come from a laboratory." "Elder Bertha," Chancellor Bitsworth said with strained patience, "you mentioned something about bloodlines?" "I'm getting to that. Can't a woman critique her dessert in peace?" Bertha took a large bite of ice cream, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded with satisfaction. "That's better. Now then, where was I? Oh yes, the genocide." Several people choked on their sundaes. "I'm sorry," Penny said weakly, "did you say genocide?" "Well, attempted genocide. Your family was surprisingly resilient." Bertha pointed her spoon at Penny with surgical precision. "Penelope Wobblethorn, you are the last living descendant of the moon-blessed royal family. Your great-great-grandmother was Princess Serenity Moonwhisper, rightful heir to the Silver Moon Pack throne. The dining hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Penny just stared, a spoonful of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream halfway to her mouth. That's not possible, she said faintly. I'm a party supply store employee who gets her head stuck in things. Royal bloodlines are funny that way, Bertha said cheerfully. All that concentrated power has to go somewhere. Usually shows up as either tremendous dignity or spectacular clumsiness. Guess which category you fall into? But my parents were in hiding. Had been for decades, ever since the great cookie poisoning of 1954. Darius felt like someone had replaced his ice cream with lead. Cookie poisoning? Oh yes. Very clever plan, really. Someone figured out that the moon-blessed royalty had a traditional tea time every Sunday, complete with special herbal anxiety cookies made from an ancient family recipe. All it took was one bad batch, cookies laced with dairy-based poison instead of the usual calming herbs, and within a month, nearly the entire bloodline was dead. Dairy-based poison? Penny repeated in horror. Lactose intolerance is quite serious for wolves, Bertha explained matter-of-factly. Fatal, in large enough doses. And the moon-blessed line was particularly susceptible, which someone had clearly researched very thoroughly. The dining hall had gone completely silent except for the sound of melting ice cream dripping onto plates. Elder Bertha, Darius said, his voice carefully controlled, who ordered the poisoning? Bertha looked at him with something that might have been pity. Your grandfather, dear. King Reginald Fluffington III. Ambitious man, terrible at assassination, but quite good at covering his tracks. Darius felt the world tilt sideways. Magnus was howling with distress in his head, and his ice cream suddenly tasted like ash. That's not, my grandfather was a good king. He unified the packs, established the modern territorial agreements. Oh, he was an excellent king, Bertha agreed. Terrible person, mind you, but very effective leadership. The cookie poisoning was his way of eliminating the competition for the throne. Unfortunately for him, he was too incompetent to finish the job properly. Some of them survived, Penny said quietly. Your great-great-grandmother and a handful of others. They went into hiding, changed their names, suppressed their powers, and spent the next 70 years pretending to be ordinary pack members. Bertha took another bite of ice cream and frowned. These chocolate chips are subpar. What happened to quality control? Elder Bertha, Chancellor Bitsworth interrupted desperately. Are you saying that His Majesty's family built their dynasty on lactose-intolerant genocide? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds so dramatic. I prefer to think of it as aggressive succession planning with dairy products. Bertha waved her spoon dismissively. The point is, young Penelope here is the rightful heir to the Silver Moon Pack throne, and young Darius is the descendant of the man who tried to murder her entire family. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a sprinkle drop. So, Penny said finally, still holding her ice cream spoon like a weapon, just to clarify, you're telling me that my boyfriend's grandfather tried to commit genocide against my family using poisoned cookies, and this is all coming out during an ice cream social? Life has a sense of humor, Bertha said philosophically. Also, I've been waiting 70 years to tell someone this story, and I figured today was as good as any. Darius looked across the table at Penny, who was staring at her melting sundae with an expression of complete bewilderment. The mate bond was still there, still strong, but now it felt complicated in ways that made his chest ache. Penny, he said quietly, I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea. Of course you didn't know, she interrupted, looking up at him with those impossible green eyes. You were busy being a good king and trying to figure out why you kept dreaming about a clumsy silver wolf. Meanwhile, I was busy being a walking disaster who didn't even know she was a werewolf until last week. But this changes everything, Chancellor Bitsworth said urgently. If Miss Wobblethorn is the rightful heir, then we have a problem, Penny finished. Because I don't want to be a queen. I can barely handle being a functioning adult, let alone running a pack. Plus, I'm pretty sure there are rules against marrying the descendant of the man who tried to murder your family. Actually, Elder Bertha said thoughtfully, I believe the traditional penalty for attempted royal genocide is either death or marriage to the surviving bloodline. Medieval justice was very practical that way. Everyone stared at her. What? She said defensively. I'm 847 years old. I remember when those laws were written. Terrible handwriting, but very clear legal precedent. Stella, who had been unusually quiet since her fountain adventure, suddenly stood up so fast her chair fell over. Wait just a minute, she said, pointing her spoon at Penny like an accusation. Are you telling me that I just lost a death match to actual royalty? On live television? In front of 200,000 people? Well, Penny said weakly, at least it's going viral for historically significant reasons. The chat was a blur of crown emojis, fire emojis, and increasingly creative spellings of plot twist. This is a disaster, Stella moaned, collapsing back into her chair. My brand is ruined. No one's going to follow an influencer who got defeated by secret royalty. Do you know how impossible that is to spin positively? You could rebrand as a comedy account? Penny suggested helpfully. I mean, getting set on fire by sneezing is pretty meme-worthy. This is not helping. Elder Bertha finished her ice cream and set down her spoon with a satisfied sigh. Well, that was refreshing. Nothing like a good revelation with quality dairy products. Even if the sprinkles were disappointing. Elder Bertha, Darius said desperately, what happens now? What do we do with this information? That, young king, is up to you and your mate to figure out. Bertha stood up slowly, leaning heavily on her walking stick. I've done my part. Kept the secret for 70 years, waited until the bloodline was strong enough to reclaim what was stolen, and delivered the truth with appropriate dessert accompaniment. She paused at the door and looked back at them with ancient, knowing eyes. For what it's worth, she said quietly, your grandfather may have been a murderous schemer, but you're not him. And Penny's family may have been royalty, but she's not interested in revenge. Sometimes the children are better than their bloodlines deserve. After she left, the dining hall remained silent except for the soft sounds of melting ice cream and 200,000 strangers commenting on the most awkward family revelation in live-streamed history. So, Penny said finally, anyone want to explain to me how exactly one goes about being accidentally royal? Because I feel like there should be a manual for this. Darius looked at her, his mate, his anchor, his perfectly chaotic disaster of a woman who had just discovered she was the rightful queen of his pack and the descendant of his family's victims, and felt something that was either profound love or a complete nervous breakdown. I think, he said carefully, we're going to have to figure that out together. Together, Penny agreed, then looked around the table at the shocked faces of the pack leadership. But maybe we could start by turning off the live stream? Because I'm pretty sure this level of family trauma wasn't meant to be shared with 200,000 strangers. Good point, Stella said, reaching for her phone with shaking hands. Though honestly, after today, I'm not sure my follower count will ever recover anyway. As the live stream finally ended, Darius reached across the table and took Penny's hand. Ice cream and royal bloodlines and ancient genocides be damned. Some things, he decided, were more important than history. Even when that history involved lactose-intolerant assassination plots and the world's most incompetent royal reveal. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 6. The emergency stress knitting hit Darius square in the chest with the devastating accuracy of heartbreak and terrible aim. I can't, Penny declared, standing in the ruins of the ice cream social with tears streaming down her face and a half-finished scarf unraveling in her hands. I can never love someone whose family destroyed the ancient art of therapeutic baking. The words hung in the air like a death sentence wrapped in yarn. Penny, Darius said desperately, multicolored wool pooling around his feet, that was 70 years ago. 70 years ago, your grandfather murdered my family with cookies, Darius. Cookies. She gestured wildly with her knitting needles, nearly taking out a chandelier. Do you understand what that means? Every time I look at you, I'm going to think about poisoned snickerdoodles and dairy-based genocide. But we're mates, he said, the words coming out broken and small. The bond. The bond is built on a lie. Penny's voice cracked with the weight of her decision. I can feel it trying to pull me toward you, but how can I trust something that was forged between a murderer's grandson and a victim's descendant? How do I know it's real and not just some cosmic joke? She threw the rest of her stress knitting at him, a truly impressive amount considering she'd apparently been anxiety crafting through the entire ice cream revelation, and backed toward the dining hall door. Penny, please, we can work through this. No, she said firmly, then slightly less firmly, no, we can't. I need time to think. I need space. I need to not be around you while I figure out how to feel about any of this. And with that, she turned and fled, leaving Darius standing alone in a pile of unfinished scarves, abandoned ice cream, and the shocked silence of the pack leadership. Go after her, Magnus whined desperately. Don't let her leave. Fix this. But Darius couldn't move. The mate bond was still there, but it felt like a broken thing now, all jagged edges and pain where there should have been warmth and certainty. Your Majesty, Chancellor Bitsworth said carefully, perhaps we should. Send word to the border patrols, Darius interrupted, his voice hollow. Make sure she's safe. But don't bring her back. If she wants space, we give her space. Even if it killed him. Penny made it approximately 7 minutes into her dramatic exit before she realized she was completely, hopelessly lost. The palace gardens were apparently designed by someone with a sadistic sense of humor and an advanced degree in landscape-based torture. What had seemed like a straightforward path to freedom had somehow become a twisting maze of hedgerows, decorative fountains, and an alarming number of garden gnomes with judgmental expressions. This is fine, she muttered to herself, taking what she hoped was a turn toward the main gate. I'm a powerful wolf with ancient bloodline magic. I can handle getting out of a garden. She turned left, then right, then left again, and found herself face to face with a particularly smug-looking gnome wearing a tiny pointed hat and an expression that clearly said, I told you so. Oh, come on, she said to the gnome. Don't look at me like that. We're all having a bad day here. That's when she heard the low, threatening growl from somewhere behind the rose bushes. Penny spun around to find 3 rogue wolves emerging from the landscaping, their eyes glowing with hostile intent and their scents carrying the distinctive markers of wolves who had been living outside pack law for too long. Well, she said philosophically, this day just keeps getting better. The largest rogue, a scarred female with one notched ear, grinned unpleasantly. Look what we have here. The famous Penny Wobblethorn, the little Omega who thinks she's a queen. Actually, I think I'm having an identity crisis, Penny corrected. The queen thing is still up for debate. Not for long, the rogue snarled. There are certain parties very interested in making sure you never make it to any throne. Dead royalty can't claim anything. Time to run, Penny's wolf advised urgently. Or fight. Or set something on fire. Really, any of those options would be better than standing here chatting. Penny took a step backward and immediately tripped over the smug gnome, sending her sprawling into what appeared to be an ornamental herb garden. The scent of crushed rosemary and thyme filled the air, and for a moment, she was 7 years old again, helping her mother gather herbs while humming ancient songs. Remember what she taught you, her wolf whispered. Remember the old ways. The rogues were advancing, clearly confident in their numerical advantage and Penny's apparent helplessness. What they hadn't counted on was the way the herbs beneath her hands began to glow with silver light, or the way her desperate fear was translating into something much more powerful than a sneeze-induced fire. You know what? Penny said, climbing to her feet with dirt on her knees and magic crackling around her fingers. I've had a really, really bad day. And I think I'm about to make it your problem. The first rogue lunged just as Penny's power exploded outward in a wave of silver light and protective fury. When the light faded, the rogues were gone, not dead, but definitely elsewhere and probably reconsidering their life choices. The herb garden, however, had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale, with plants growing in impossible spirals and flowers that glowed with their own inner light. And every garden gnome in sight was standing at attention, their painted eyes fixed on Penny with expressions of profound respect. "Okay," she said slowly, "that's new." The smug gnome, who was no longer looking quite so smug, cleared his throat with a sound like grinding ceramic. "Your Majesty," he said in a voice like pebbles in a tumbler, "we've been waiting for you." 6 hours later, Penny was holding court in what she'd learned was the center of the palace hedge maze, surrounded by approximately 47 garden gnomes who had apparently been planning a revolution for the better part of 3 decades. "So let me get this straight," she said, sitting cross-legged on the ground with a gnome named Reginald perched on her knee. "You've all been sentient this entire time, and nobody noticed?" "Humans and wolves see what they expect to see," explained Brunhild, a particularly fierce-looking gnome with a tiny battle axe. "We've been watching, waiting, organizing. The Fluffington dynasty has been terrible for garden maintenance. They replaced all the heritage roses with hybrid tea varieties," added Mortimer, who seemed to be their horticultural expert. "No respect for tradition. No understanding of the old ways. And don't get me started on the fertilizer situation," grumbled Ethel, shaking her tiny fist. "Chemical nonsense. In my day, which was 1847, mind you, we used proper compost and herb-blessed soil amendments." Penny rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building that had nothing to do with her recent magical explosion and everything to do with the surreal nature of her current situation. "You want me to lead a garden gnome revolution," she said carefully. "Not a revolution," Reginald corrected. "A restoration. You're the moon-blessed heir. You understand the old ways, the connection between earth and magic and growing things. We felt it when you awakened the herb garden. I was mostly just trying not to get eaten by rogue wolves. And in doing so, you restored 30 years of neglected soil magic in 30 seconds, Brunhild said approvingly. Very impressive work." Penny looked around at the expectant ceramic faces and felt something that was either profound responsibility or a complete break from reality. What exactly would this restoration involve? "Proper garden management," Mortimer said immediately. "Sustainable landscaping practices. An end to the tyranny of weekly hedge trimming. The hedge maze is supposed to shift on its own," Ethel added. "It's ancient magic, designed to test and teach. But they've been cutting it back so aggressively that it's lost its voice." "The maze has a voice?" "Of course it has a voice," Reginald said, as if this were obvious. "How do you think you ended up here, right where we needed you to be?" Penny considered this. She'd been wandering lost for hours, and somehow she'd ended up in exactly the right place to discover a gnome conspiracy and have a magical awakening in an herb garden. Either that was an incredible coincidence, or... "The maze brought me here," she said slowly. "Finally," Brunhild muttered. "For royal bloodline, she's a bit slow on the uptake." "I heard that. You were meant to." Despite everything, the heartbreak, the identity crisis, the fact that she was apparently having a political discussion with garden ornaments, Penny found herself smiling for the first time since the ice cream revelation. "All right," she said. "What do I need to do?" Meanwhile, back in the palace, Darius was experiencing what could generously be called a complete personal and political meltdown. It had started with the stress eating. After Penny's dramatic exit, he'd retreated to his private quarters with the intention of brooding majestically and possibly writing some very sad poetry about lost love and royal responsibility. Instead, he'd found himself in the kitchen at 2 a.m, mechanically working his way through what appeared to be an entire cheesecake. "This is not healthy," Magnus observed, but his voice was weak and distant. The wolf had been getting quieter ever since Penny left, as if the severed mate bond was draining his strength. "I don't care about healthy," Darius mumbled through a mouthful of chocolate cake that had somehow appeared after the cheesecake. "I care about not thinking about silver eyes and stress knitting. You need to eat real food. Protein. Vegetables. Something that isn't 90% sugar. Pie has fruit," Darius pointed out, reaching for what appeared to be an entire apple pie. "Fruit is healthy." By dawn, He'd consumed enough dessert to cater a small wedding, and Magnus had gone almost completely silent. By noon, other symptoms were becoming apparent. His reflexes were slower, his enhanced senses were fading, and when he tried to shift, nothing happened. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Bitsworth said carefully, finding him slumped over his desk in what appeared to be a sugar coma, "the Alpha Council has sent some correspondence." Darius looked up from his faceplant position on his desk to see Bitsworth holding a large wicker basket filled with fruit and what appeared to be a card. "Fruit basket? From Alpha Henderson of the Mountain Territory. With compliments." Bitsworth's expression suggested that compliments was not the word he would have chosen. Darius took the card and read aloud, "Congratulations on your recent political developments. These pairs are almost as fragile as unstable leadership. Hope you enjoy them before they rot. Warmest regards, Alpha Henderson." "That's not very subtle," Darius observed. "There are 6 more baskets," Bitsworth said grimly. "Each more passive-aggressive than the last. Alpha Morrison sent grapes with a note about how quickly sweet things turn sour. Alpha Blackthorn sent a pineapple with instructions on how to tell when something is too sharp to handle safely. And the others? Melons with commentary on soft leadership, bananas with observations about things that go bad quickly, and a particularly unpleasant arrangement from Alpha Darkwater featuring overripe tomatoes and a note about the importance of knowing when to throw something out." Darius stared at the accumulating fruit baskets and felt what remained of his wolf strength flicker weakly. "They know," he said flatly. "About the mate bond breaking. About Magnus getting weaker. Word travels fast in the supernatural community, Your Majesty. And a king without his wolf strength is..." Bitsworth paused delicately. "Vulnerable," Darius finished. "A target. Perhaps it's time to consider reconciliation with Miss Wobblethorn?" Darius thought about Penny's tear-streaked face, the way she'd thrown her knitting at him like a weapon, the finality in her voice when she'd said she could never love him. "She made her choice," he said quietly. "And I have to respect that, even if it destroys everything." "Everything is already destroyed," Magnus whispered, so faintly that Darius almost missed it. "We're dying without her." Outside his window, storm clouds were gathering despite the forecast for clear skies, and somewhere in the distance, he could swear he heard the sound of revolution. Or possibly just very determined gardening. Either way, it probably wasn't a good sign. "Your Majesty," Reginald said seriously, adjusting his tiny pointed hat, "I believe it's time you knew the full scope of our situation." Penny, who had spent the last hour learning about soil pH levels and the political implications of mulch distribution, looked up from where she was helping Ethel organize what appeared to be a seed catalog. "There's more. The Garden Gnome Liberation Movement extends far beyond these hedges," Brunhild explained. "We have allies throughout the Pack territories. Lawn ornaments, decorative statuary, even some of the more politically minded bird baths." "You're organizing lawn ornaments across multiple territories?" "Decades of planning," Mortimer said proudly. "Ever since the Fluffington dynasty started their aggressive landscape modernization program. Do you know what they did to the traditional herb spirals?" "I'm afraid to ask." "Replaced them with decorative grass." "Decorative grass, Your Majesty." As if grass alone could channel earth magic or support proper medicinal plantings. Penny was beginning to understand that she'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple garden gnome uprising. This was apparently a full-scale resistance movement against modern landscaping practices, and somehow she'd become their chosen leader. "What exactly do you need me to do?" she asked. "Help us restore the old ways," Reginald said simply. "The gardens, the magic, the connection between earth and power that the Fluffington dynasty has been systematically destroying for generations. And in return? We help you reclaim what is rightfully yours," Brunhild said, her ceramic eyes glinting with determination. "Throne, territory, and if you want our opinion, that heartbroken king who's been stress-eating himself into a magical coma for the past 6 hours." Penny felt her heart clench at the mention of Darius. "He's, what?" "Mate bond severance," Ethel said matter-of-factly. "Terrible for the wolf's constitution. He'll be completely powerless within a day or two if something doesn't change." But I can't, after what his family did. Child, Mortimer said gently, do you judge a rose by the thorns of its grandmother's bush? Penny stared at him. That's either very profound or complete nonsense. Both, Reginald agreed cheerfully. Most wisdom is. The question is, are you going to let the past destroy your future, or are you going to build something better? Around them, the garden gnomes waited for her answer with the patience of creatures who had been planning revolution for 30 years and were prepared to wait 30 more if necessary. In the distance, thunder rumbled, and Penny felt her heart pull toward the palace where Darius was apparently eating himself into magical oblivion. Some choices, she realized, were bigger than family history and poisoned cookies. Even really, really good cookies. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 7. The second wave of rogue attacks hit at precisely 3:17 a.m., which should have been the first clue that they were dealing with someone who understood the importance of proper scheduling. Darius dragged himself out of his sugar-induced stupor at the sound of the alarm bells, his head pounding and his connection to Magnus barely a whisper. He stumbled toward the window of his study, which had somehow been rearranged again, with his desk now facing east instead of north and his reading chair mysteriously relocated to the opposite corner. Chancellor Bitsworth, he called, trying to ignore the way his voice cracked from weakness. What's the situation? Border breach at the south gate, Your Majesty, came the reply through the door. But sir, this isn't like the previous attacks. They're organized. Coordinated. And they're using our own defensive positions against us. Darius felt what little remained of his wolf strength drain away. Someone with inside knowledge. It appears so, sir. They knew exactly where the patrol rotations would be, exactly which entry points were least defended. This was planned by someone who studied our security protocols extensively. Need to shift, Magnus managed weakly. Pack needs their alpha. But when Darius tried to call forth his wolf form, nothing happened except a mild cramping sensation and the embarrassing realization that he was probably going to need a nap after this conversation. Sir? Bitsworth's voice carried a note of concern. Are you quite all right? Fine, Darius lied, gripping the window frame for support. Just, preparing for battle. Strategic thinking. Very important. Outside, he could see the aftermath of the attack, damaged fencing, scorch marks that suggested the use of accelerants, and, most unnervingly, what appeared to be a series of decorative banners hung from the trees. Even from this distance, he could make out coordinated color schemes and professional quality graphics. Sir, Bitsworth said carefully, there's something else. The attackers left a message. What kind of message? An invitation. With matching envelopes and what appears to be a seating chart. 2 miles away, in the center of the hedge maze, Penny was discovering that leading a garden gnome revolution was significantly more complicated than she'd anticipated. The east flank needs better organization, Brunhild was saying, pointing at what appeared to be a tiny military map carved into a tree stump. Mortimer's team has the mulch distribution under control, but we're weak on the decorative fountain front. I still don't understand how decorative fountains factor into a garden revolution, Penny said, rubbing her temples. Water features are crucial for earth magic, Ethel explained patiently. Proper hydration, mineral distribution, and the fountains carry information throughout the garden network. How do you think we've been coordinating with gnomes in other territories? I thought you were just talking to each other. Oh, child, Reginald chuckled, we've been running an underground communication network through the water systems for decades. How do you think we knew about the attacks before they happened? Penny stared at him. You knew about the attacks? Well, not exactly, Mortimer hedged. But we knew something was coming. The flowers have been agitated for days, and the herb spiral has been humming with defensive energy. The herb spiral hums? When there's danger approaching the bloodline, Brunhild said matter-of-factly. It's been trying to warn you, but you've been too distracted by heartbreak and identity crises to listen properly. Before Penny could ask what exactly one was supposed to listen for in a humming herb spiral, A new voice cut through the garden air like a blade through silk. Well, well, well. Look what we have here. My darling little sister, playing army with lawn ornaments. Penny spun around to find a figure emerging from the hedge maze shadows, tall, lean, with the same green eyes she saw in the mirror every morning, but harder, colder, touched with years of carefully cultivated hatred. Buster, she whispered, the name falling from her lips like a prayer and a curse all at once. Hello, Penelope, her supposedly dead brother said, sketching an elaborate bow that wouldn't have looked out of place at a Renaissance fair. Love what you've done with the place. Very rustic. Though I have to say, the garden gnome aesthetic is a bit basic for someone of your newfound royal status. He was wearing what appeared to be a perfectly coordinated outfit in shades of burgundy and gold, complete with matching accessories and a cape that managed to look both dramatic and professionally tailored. Even his approach through the maze had been choreographed for maximum visual impact. You're supposed to be dead, Penny said faintly. Dead? Oh, darling, death is so limiting. I prefer to think of myself as dramatically relocated. Buster adjusted his cape with practiced flair. I've been very busy these past 15 years. Did you know there's an entire market for revenge-themed event planning? Very lucrative, especially when you have personal experience with elaborate family tragedies. The garden gnomes had gone very still, their painted eyes fixed on Buster with expressions of deep suspicion. You survived the cookie poisoning, Penny said slowly, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place in her mind. Lactose intolerant, remember? Mother always made special dairy-free versions of the anxiety cookies just for me. Buster's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Ironic, really. The very dietary restriction that made me an outcast in the family ended up saving my life when dear grandfather Fluffington decided to eliminate our bloodline. But Gran said what I told her to say, Buster interrupted smoothly. After I found her hiding in the mountains, terrified and grief-stricken, it wasn't hard to convince her that I'd died with the rest of them. Easier to let her believe she was protecting one traumatized granddaughter than explain that her grandson had survived and was planning the longest, most elaborate revenge plot in werewolf history. Penny felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. The suppression cookies. You made Gran give me suppression cookies. Guilty as charged. Though in my defense, I needed you weak and manageable until the time was right. Can't have the last moon-blessed heir running around setting things on fire before I was ready to use that power properly. Buster examined his perfectly manicured nails with casual cruelty. Did you really think it was coincidence that your powers awakened just when the blood moon was approaching? That you happened to catch the Alpha King's attention right when I needed the pack leadership distracted? The mariachi band, Penny whispered. Stella's ridiculous assassination attempts. You've been orchestrating everything. Event planning skills are surprisingly transferable to elaborate revenge schemes. Who knew? Buster gestured grandly at the maze around them. Though I have to admit, the garden gnome uprising wasn't part of my original plan. That's been delightfully unexpected. Brunhild made a sound like grinding granite. We don't serve revenge-obsessed pretty boys in coordinated outfits. How rude, Buster said, looking genuinely offended. This outfit took months to plan. The color scheme alone required extensive consultation with seasonal palette experts. What do you want, Buster? Penny asked, though she was already afraid she knew the answer. What I've always wanted, sister dear. Justice. Revenge. The complete and utter destruction of every pack that stood by and did nothing while our family was murdered. His eyes glittered with malice and what appeared to be genuine artistic passion. And I'm going to do it through the ancient art of weaponized baking. Weaponized baking? Oh, it's brilliant, Buster said, beginning to pace with the enthusiasm of someone explaining their favorite hobby. Do you know what every pack has in common? Comfort foods. Traditional recipes passed down through generations. Cookies, cakes, breads, all of it tied to memory and emotion and pack bonding. All of it completely vulnerable to the right kind of magical manipulation. You want to poison everyone's comfort food? Not poison, transform. Turn their sources of comfort into sources of terror. Imagine every pack gathering where the traditional foods turn against them. Every celebration becomes a nightmare. Every comfort becomes a weapon. Buster's smile was radiant with malicious joy. It's poetic justice, really. They destroyed our family with corrupted cookies, so I'll destroy their families the same way. That's insane, Penny said flatly. That's themed, Buster corrected. Everything has to have a proper theme, Penelope. Revenge without aesthetic coherence is just violence. Revenge with a carefully planned presentation? That's art. You've lost your mind. I've found my calling. There's a difference. Buster stopped pacing and fixed her with a stare that was disturbingly intense. And you're going to help me? I absolutely am not. Oh, but you are. Because if you don't, I'll start with the pack you've grown so fond of. Beginning with your heartbroken mate, who's currently stress-eating himself into a magical coma. Buster's expression turned mockingly sympathetic. Did you know that broken mate bonds make wolves particularly susceptible to food-based curses? Something about the emotional vulnerability. Very convenient for my purposes. Penny felt her power flare in response to the threat, silver light beginning to gather around her hands. Stay away from Darius. There's that lovely royal temper, Buster said approvingly. I'll need that energy for the spell work. Ancient bloodline magic is so much more effective when it's powered by genuine emotion. I said stay away from him. And I said you're going to help me, Buster replied, pulling what appeared to be a professional quality event planning tablet from his cape. Now, shall we discuss the logistics? I'm thinking a autumn harvest theme for the pack-wide destruction. Very seasonal, and the color palette will work beautifully with the screaming. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Darius was discovering that his furniture rearrangement problem had escalated significantly. Your Majesty, Chancellor Bitsworth said carefully, finding him standing in what used to be his bedroom but was now apparently configured as some sort of strategic war room, I hate to add to your current difficulties, but we have a situation. Another fruit basket? Worse. Alpha Morrison and Alpha Henderson have requested an emergency council meeting. They claim it's about mutual defense concerns, but the subtext appears to be questioning your fitness to rule. Darius looked around at his mysteriously rearranged furniture. His bed had been moved to face the window, his desk was now positioned for optimal defensive positioning, and someone had apparently installed what looked like a tiny periscope system in his wardrobe. When? Tomorrow at dawn. They're bringing their full council delegations. Bitsworth paused. Sir, with respect, you may want to consider preparing for this meeting. Your current condition. My current condition is fine, Darius said, then immediately undermined this statement by swaying slightly and grabbing onto what used to be his nightstand for support. Sir, you haven't been able to shift in 18 hours. Your enhanced senses are practically non-existent. And according to the kitchen staff, you've consumed enough sugar in the past day to power a small carnival. Tell him about the gnomes, Magnus whispered weakly. They're trying to help. What gnomes? Darius said aloud, then realized he'd spoken out loud when Bitsworth gave him a concerned look. Sir? Nothing. Strategic thinking. Very important. Before Bitsworth could express further concern about his mental state, a commotion in the courtyard drew their attention to the window. A group of palace guards was escorting someone toward the main entrance, someone in an elaborate burgundy and gold outfit who moved with the kind of theatrical confidence that suggested either extreme self-assurance or complete detachment from reality. Who is that? Darius asked. Bitsworth consulted his tablet. According to the identification he provided, that's Buster Wobblethorn. He claims to be here for a family reunion and has requested an immediate audience with you and his sister. Penny has a brother? Apparently so. He's also provided what appears to be a very professionally designed presentation about collaborative revenge opportunities and has requested access to the palace kitchens for what he calls a small catering demonstration. Darius felt what remained of his wolf instincts prickle with unease. Everything about this felt wrong, the timing, the presentation, the fact that Penny had never mentioned having a living brother. Deny the kitchen access, he said firmly. And find out where Penny is. Now. "Sir, she's still in the garden maze. The search parties have been looking for her for hours, but they keep getting turned around and somehow ending up back at the fountain with their equipment rearranged. The maze is actively hindering the search." "It appears so, sir. Very unusual behavior for landscaping." Darius looked out at the gardens, where he could swear he saw tiny figures moving between the hedgerows with military precision, and realized that his furniture rearrangement problem might be the least of his concerns. "Cancel the meeting with the other alphas," he said. "And send word to Elder Bertha. Tell her we need to discuss ancient bloodlines, family secrets, and why I'm apparently being protected by militant garden ornaments." "Sir. Just trust me on this one." Outside, storm clouds were gathering with supernatural speed, and somewhere in the maze, Darius could feel his mate's power flaring like a beacon in the darkness. Whatever was happening, whatever family reunion from hell was about to unfold, he had the sinking feeling that furniture rearrangement was going to be the least of their problems. "Find her," Magnus managed weakly. "Before it's too late." For once, Darius was in complete agreement with his fading wolf. Some family reunions, he suspected, were better avoided entirely. Especially when they involved coordinated outfits and requests for kitchen access. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 8. The smell hit the palace first, a wave of yeast and rising dough and something that wasn't quite vanilla, wasn't quite nutmeg, but made every wolf within a 5-mile radius suddenly, desperately hungry for things they couldn't name. "What in the seven hells is that?" Darius muttered, stumbling toward his mysteriously rearranged window as the scent wafted through the palace like an aromatic invasion. "Comfort food magic," Elder Bertha said grimly from behind him, apparently having materialized in his quarters through means he was too weak to question. "Ancient bloodline baking. Your girlfriend's psychotic brother is weaponizing nostalgia." Through the window, they could see the courtyard filling with an army that defied all conventional military logic. Rogue wolves marched in formation, but they were carrying what appeared to be serving platters instead of weapons. Elaborate buffet tables were being wheeled into position with the precision of siege equipment. And at the center of it all, Buster Wobblethorn stood behind what looked like a professional-grade outdoor kitchen setup, wearing a chef's hat that somehow managed to look both ridiculous and terrifying. "Is he catering his own invasion?" Darius asked weakly. "Worse," Bertha replied, pulling out what appeared to be a very old, very sharp rolling pin. "He's turning comfort into compulsion. Every bite of those cursed appetizers will bind the eater to his will. Classic bloodline magic, but twisted for control instead of healing." "And Penny?" Standing in the center of the maze, arguing with 47 garden gnomes about proper strategic positioning while her brother prepares to enslave every wolf in the territory through the medium of hors d'oeuvres. Bertha hefted her rolling pin with practiced ease. "So, typical Tuesday." Before Darius could ask why Elder Bertha was armed with baking equipment, a new voice echoed across the courtyard with the projection skills of someone who'd clearly done professional theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, wolves and assorted supernatural beings." Buster's voice carried easily to every corner of the palace grounds. "Welcome to the event you've all been unconsciously anticipating, the Great Bake-Off Battle Royale. Today, we settle the question of bloodline supremacy through the ancient art of competitive comfort food." "He's completely insane," Magnus whispered weakly from somewhere deep in Darius's consciousness. "Insane but organized," Darius corrected, watching as Buster's rogue army began arranging what appeared to be a full-scale outdoor catering operation. "Look at that setup. Professional-grade equipment, coordinated serving staff, matching aprons. This isn't chaos, this is event planning." Tonight's theme, Buster continued with theatrical enthusiasm, is "Revenge is a dish best served with proper garnish." Each of our carefully crafted appetizers has been infused with compulsion magic designed to bring out your deepest fears and turn them into uncontrollable hunger. You'll find yourself craving not just the food, but the submission that comes with it. "That's definitely not how comfort food is supposed to work," Bertha muttered. In the heart of the maze, Penny was discovering that leading a supernatural rebellion while having an emotional breakdown was significantly more complicated than anyone had prepared her for. The perimeter defenses are in position, Brunhild reported, her tiny ceramic features set in grim determination. Mortimer's team has the water features coordinated for maximum magical amplification, and Ethel's group has prepared emergency soil amendments in case we need to rapidly establish protective herb barriers. I still don't understand how soil amendments are going to help against evil appetizers, Penny said, pacing between the ancient herb spirals that were now glowing with silver light and humming what sounded distinctly like battle songs. Child, Reginald said patiently, you're thinking like a human. Comfort food magic isn't about the food, it's about the comfort. The emotional connection. The way certain flavors can transport you back to safety, to love, to belonging. But Buster's corrupting that. Using it for control instead of healing. Exactly. Which is why you need to remember what comfort food magic is really supposed to do. The ancient gnome's painted eyes held depths of wisdom that belied his ceramic construction. Your brother has spent 15 years learning to weaponize nostalgia. You need to remember how to heal it. Penny stopped pacing and stared at him. I don't know how to heal anything. I barely know how to not set things on fire when I sneeze. The fire isn't the problem, Ethel said firmly. The fire is just what happens when your power doesn't have the right outlet. But when you saved those cubs, when you awakened the herb garden, when you brought us together, that wasn't destruction. That was creation. I was just trying to protect people. And in protecting them, you gave them something to belong to, Brunhild added. That's what comfort food magic really is, the power to create belonging, to build community, to turn strangers into family through shared experience. The herb spiral's humming grew louder, and Penny could feel something stirring in her chest that wasn't quite her wolf, wasn't quite her magic, but something that encompassed both. The dance, she said suddenly, pieces of memory clicking together like a recipe finally coming right. That first night, when I danced, I wasn't performing for entertainment. I was doing something else. Ancient mating ritual, Reginald confirmed cheerfully. Your grandmother taught it to you when you were small, disguised as a children's game. Very clever woman, our Eleanor. Mating ritual? The Silver Moon bloodline has always chosen their mates through dance, Mortimer explained. It's a way of sharing power, of showing compatibility, of inviting someone into your magical space. You literally danced your way into that poor boy's heart. And he's been trying to dance back ever since, Ethel added with what might have been amusement. All those awkward training sessions, the rearranged furniture, even the stress eating, it's all been his wolf trying to respond to your invitation. Penny felt her heart clench. But I rejected him. I threw knitting at him and told him I could never love someone whose family destroyed therapeutic baking. Therapeutic baking isn't destroyed, Brunhild said firmly. It's just been temporarily interrupted by dramatic family trauma and poorly managed emotional processing. Very fixable, if you're willing to try. Before Penny could ask exactly how one went about fixing therapeutic baking, the sound of amplified theatrical announcements echoed through the maze. Specially prepared despair dumplings, guaranteed to make you question every life choice you've ever made. And don't miss our hopelessness hummus, served with futility flatbread and a side of existential crisis crackers. Right, Penny said, silver light beginning to gather around her hands as her power responded to the threat to her chosen family, because that's what they were, she realized. The gnomes, the pack, even Darius with his terrible social skills and his stress-eating problem. They were her people, and someone was threatening them with cursed appetizers. Time to show my brother what comfort food magic is really supposed to look like. The transformation began the moment Penny stepped out of the maze. Her silver wolf form was magnificent, larger than any female wolf had a right to be, with fur that seemed woven from actual moonlight and eyes that held the depth of ancient forests. But what made the assembled rogue army take an unconscious step backward wasn't her size or her obvious power. It was the way the air around her began to smell like home. Like Sunday morning pancakes and birthday cake and the cookies your grandmother made when you were sick. Like every comfort food memory wrapped up in silver light and protective fury. Oh, Buster said from behind his elaborate catering setup, and for the first time since his dramatic entrance, His theatrical confidence wavered. Well. That's unexpected. Penny's wolf form began to move, and where her paws touched the ground, ingredients appeared. Not weapons, not destruction, but the building blocks of comfort: flour that sparkled with starlight, eggs that glowed with golden warmth, butter that smelled like summer meadows, and childhood security. "You want to show them the power of bloodline baking," she said, her voice carrying easily across the courtyard despite the fact that wolves technically couldn't speak in shifted form. "Let me show you what comfort food magic is really supposed to do." The silver light around her intensified, and suddenly she was baking in mid-air, ingredients swirling around her in patterns that were part recipe, part dance, part ancient magic. Flour and sugar and vanilla and something that tasted like love and safety and belonging, all coming together in a creation that defied both gravity and conventional pastry physics. What emerged from the silver light was the most magnificent wedding cake the supernatural world had ever seen. It was 7 tiers of impossible perfection, decorated with flowers that looked real because they were real, growing and blooming as they emerged from the silver magic. The frosting swirled in patterns that told stories of Pack families gathered around dinner tables, of comfort shared in times of sorrow, of joy celebrated with the sweetness of tradition. And at the very top, 2 small figures that looked suspiciously like a wolf and a slightly confused king holding hands. "That's..." Darius breathed from the palace window, feeling Magnus stir with something that wasn't quite strength but was definitely hope. "Impossible," Buster finished, staring at his sister's creation with a mixture of professional admiration and personal horror. "You can't fight weaponized despair with wedding cake." "Watch me," Penny said, and with a gesture that was pure instinct and ancient bloodline memory, she sent the cake's magic outward in waves of silver light. The effect was immediate and devastating to Buster's carefully planned invasion. The first wave hit the rogue army, and instead of compulsion or control, they felt belonging. Safety. The way food was supposed to make you feel when it was prepared with love instead of manipulation. Several of the rogues actually started crying, overwhelmed by the sudden memory of what Pack family was supposed to feel like. The second wave reached Buster's cursed appetizers, transforming them instantly from weapons of psychological warfare into exactly what they appeared to be: really good party food that made people happy instead of enslaved. The third wave washed over the entire palace grounds, carrying with it the most powerful magic Penny possessed: the ability to turn strangers into family through shared embarrassment and really excellent cake. "This is impossible," Buster said again, but his voice had lost its theatrical confidence. "Revenge doesn't work this way. Trauma doesn't heal this way. You can't just bake your way through family genocide." "Maybe not," Penny said, shifting back to human form but keeping the silver light crackling around her hands, "but I can bake my way through family healing. And I can definitely out-cater your revenge party." She gestured toward her magnificent wedding cake, which was somehow multiplying, smaller versions appearing throughout the courtyard, each one perfect, each one carrying the same magic of comfort and belonging and the promise that family was something you chose, not something that was chosen for you. "You spent 15 years learning to weaponize comfort," she continued, walking toward her brother with the confidence of someone who had finally figured out what her power was really for. "I'm offering you the chance to learn how to heal it instead." "This is the strangest military engagement I've ever witnessed," Chancellor Bitsworth observed, watching through the window as an army of rogue wolves shared wedding cake with palace guards while apparently crying happy tears. "It's not a military engagement," Darius said, finally understanding what he was seeing. "It's a family intervention. With catering." Magnus stirred more strongly in his chest, responding to the waves of comfort magic washing over the palace. "She's healing the mate bond," his wolf observed with wonder. "Not demanding, not controlling. Just offering. Like an invitation." "Sir," Bitsworth said carefully, "I believe Miss Wobblethorn is walking toward the palace." "Should I?" "Let her come," Darius said, already moving toward the door. "And Bitsworth? Have the kitchen staff prepare for a very unusual diplomatic dinner. I think we're about to renegotiate several fundamental aspects of Pack leadership." By the time he reached the courtyard, Penny was standing in front of her impossible wedding cake, covered in flour and magic and looking absolutely exhausted. Buster was sitting on the ground nearby, staring at a piece of cake with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been fundamentally reorganized. "So," Penny said when she saw Darius approaching, "I've been thinking about the whole dual monarchy situation." "Have you now? I figure you're pretty good at the political stuff, the military strategy, the diplomatic fruit basket interpretation." She gestured at the chaos around them, where rogue wolves and palace guards were apparently bonding over shared dessert. "But I might have a talent for the food-related diplomatic events." Food-related diplomacy? Think about it, every pack gathering involves eating. Every alliance negotiation happens over dinner. Every celebration requires catering. Penny's smile was soft but determined. "What if instead of fighting over who gets to be in charge, we just divided up the responsibilities based on what we're actually good at?" Darius looked at the wedding cake that had somehow defeated an army through the power of making people remember what family was supposed to feel like, then at the woman who had created it while simultaneously healing decades of trauma and preventing a supernatural war. "Are you proposing a political partnership?" he asked. "I'm proposing that we stop letting other people's mistakes keep us from building something better." Penny held out her hand, silver light still crackling faintly around her fingers. "Also, I'm formally requesting the right to establish the kingdom's first royal bakery, because apparently I have opinions about therapeutic baking that need proper institutional support." Darius took her hand, feeling the mate bond snap back into place with a warmth that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with finally choosing each other freely. "I think," he said, "that sounds like the best political alliance in the history of supernatural governance." "Good," Penny said, then sneezed. Nothing caught fire. Instead, small silver sparkles drifted down like snow, and somewhere in the distance, the garden gnomes cheered. 6 months later, the Silver Moon Pack had become famous throughout the supernatural world for 3 things: the most effective diplomatic dinners in recorded history, the lowest crime rate of any territory, thanks to the newly established royal security detail of militant garden ornaments, and wedding cake so magnificent that people planned political alliances just for the excuse to order one. "The Eastern Pack delegation is requesting our signature reconciliation roast for their border dispute mediation dinner," Penny announced, looking up from her scheduling tablet as she put the finishing touches on what appeared to be a 7-layer peace treaty cake. "Approved," Darius said, not looking up from his own paperwork. Also, Alpha Morrison sent another fruit basket. This one came with actual compliments instead of passive-aggressive threats. "Character growth through superior catering," Penny said with satisfaction. "I love it when diplomatic strategy works." From his position on the windowsill, Reginald cleared his tiny ceramic throat. "Your Majesties, the evening patrol reports all clear. No rogue activity, no border incursions, and the decorative fountain network is functioning at optimal magical capacity." "Thank you, Reginald," Darius said seriously. "Because once you accepted that your royal security detail consisted of garden gnomes with a talent for strategic landscaping, it actually made perfect sense. They were already positioned throughout the territory, they had an extensive communication network, and they took their protective duties very seriously. Plus, nobody ever suspected the garden ornaments." "Any word from Buster?" Penny asked, as she did every week. "His rehabilitation program is going well," Darius reported. "The therapeutic baking classes seem to be helping, and his event planning skills are being redirected toward charity fundraisers instead of elaborate revenge schemes. Elder Bertha says he's actually quite talented when he's not channeling his creativity into evil." "Family trauma is complicated," Penny said philosophically, then looked up at Darius with eyes that still made his wolf do backflips. "But comfort food magic makes everything better eventually. Even royal politics? Especially royal politics." Outside their window, the palace gardens were thriving under the careful management of the royal security detail. The herb spirals were humming contentedly, and somewhere in the distance, a squirrel was chattering to itself about the proper storage methods for winter acorns. It was, Darius thought, exactly the kind of chaotic, magical, completely impossible life he never could have planned for and wouldn't trade for anything. Even if it did involve taking political advice from garden gnomes and solving international incidents through the strategic application of really excellent cake. Some destinies, it turned out, were worth tripping into. Epilogue, 1 year later. The annual Silver Moon Pack celebration had become the most anticipated event in the supernatural social calendar, largely because it was the only formal gathering where the entertainment included both traditional ceremonial dancing and a live demonstration of combat baking techniques. Ladies and gentlemen, Penny announced from the platform that had been built specifically for these events, tonight's menu features our signature Harmony Hash, designed to promote peaceful resolution of long-standing territorial disputes, and our newest creation, Compromise Cookies, guaranteed to make even the most stubborn alpha willing to listen to reasonable negotiation terms. The crowd, which included representatives from 12 different packs, 3 covens of witches, a delegation of particularly diplomatic vampires, and one very lost but enthusiastic group of traveling pixies, applauded enthusiastically. And for our grand finale, Darius added, stepping up beside his co-ruler with a grin that suggested he was about to announce something either wonderful or terrible, we're pleased to present the unveiling of the first official royal cookbook, Comfort Food Diplomacy, a guide to solving supernatural conflicts through strategic catering. The applause was thunderous, though possibly influenced by the fact that everyone present was under the mild euphoric effects of Penny's goodwill ganache. All proceeds, Penny continued, will go toward the newly established Wobblethorn Foundation for Therapeutic Baking Education, which will provide resources for young wolves struggling with emotional regulation through proper comfort food management. Because, Darius finished, everyone deserves to learn that the best way to handle your problems is to feed them properly and see if they turn into something more manageable. From their place of honor at the head table, Elder Bertha raised her glass of ceremonial mead. To the Silver Queen of Comfort Foods, she declared, and her chosen mate, the Royal Taste Tester. To the Royal Taste Tester, the crowd roared back, because supernatural politics were significantly more entertaining when they involved official food-related titles. And in the gardens surrounding the celebration, 47 garden gnomes stood at attention, maintaining their vigilant watch over the kingdom they had helped to build, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the best way to protect something precious was to make sure it was properly fed, adequately defended, and surrounded by people who understood that family was something you chose, preferably over really excellent cake. It was, everyone agreed, exactly the kind of ending that made sense only in retrospect, when you realize that the most important revolutions often began with someone tripping over their own feet and accidentally changing the world through the ancient magic of not giving up. Even when the giving up involved stress knitting and dramatic furniture rearrangement. Some love stories, after all, were worth every ridiculous moment it took to find them. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.